Star Wars is easily one of the most recognizable IPs on the planet, with the franchise spread across movies, TV shows, books, comics, video games, and practically any entertainment medium imaginable. Its fanbase is just as vast and varied as the planets across the Star Wars universe, with each fan having their own unique stories and memories within the franchise. Whether someone was there for the first Star Wars movie's premiere in 1977, or stumbled across the movies airing on TV, or somehow got their start with the books, TV shows, or video games, the common element of Star Wars fandom is a love and passion unlike any other. For many, Star Wars isn't just an IP, it's a dream, and developers at Massive Entertainment are living that dream with the upcoming release of Star Wars Outlaws. Any dream worth chasing is one that's not built overnight. Massive Entertainment pitched Lucasfilm on a Scoundrel Fantasy game focused on seamless open-world gameplay all the way back in 2020, and now, some 4 odd years later, that dream is becoming a reality. GameRant recently spoke with several developers at Massive Entertainment, including creative director Julian Garrity, art and world director Benedict Podolsnig, associate art director Marth Jonkers, narrative director Naveed Kavari, game director Matthias Carlson, and composer Wilbert Raja II, where we discussed realizing the dream that is Star Wars Outlaws. If you take a group of Star Wars fans and put them in a room together, the result is unpredictable. Debates are very common among the fandom, and there's no doubt fans would debate which of the Star Wars movies is best, or any other number of things like who the strongest character is, how they feel about the role of midi-chlorians in the franchise, and probably so much more. It would probably be really neatly divided as well, and at least one of them is probably swearing up and down that Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord, and there's some beauty to this, and that's the impact that Star Wars as a whole has on any specific individual, including the developers of Star Wars Outlaws. When asked about their favorite moments of the franchise, their answers were myriad as expected. Garrity was quick to point to the nostalgia he has from watching the original trilogy growing up. Podolsnig praised The Empire Strikes Back and everything it visually added to the galaxy far, far away. Jonkers recalled making sketches of X-Wings, spaceships, aliens, and lightsaber battles after watching The Empire Strikes Back for the first time. Kavari called Empire Strikes Back the gold standard for Star Wars Outlaws, and then recalled all the Star Wars games and comics he loved. Carlson also recalled being mesmerized by the world, characters, and technology of the original Star Wars trilogy, which he grew up watching. Interestingly, Garrity, Podolsnig, and Carlson all cited Max Rebo as their favorite Star Wars character. Jonkers teeted back and forth between Darth Vader and Princess Leia. Kavari explained that it was Luke Skywalker when he was younger, how it was Han Solo in high school because he wished he could be that cool, and stated that his current favorite character is Lando Calrissian. Recalling these memories of games, movies, characters, and decades upon decades of experience with Star Wars, Kavari said that something stuck with him that feels like it encapsulates everything that Star Wars Outlaws seeks to accomplish. Quote, "To me, all these pieces are part of the fabric of Star Wars, and in a lot of ways, I think Star Wars Outlaws is a love letter to this galaxy that has given so much. It's a game made by fans, for fans who all love Star Wars and everything it's given them over the years." Star Wars Outlaws was pitched as a Scoundrel Fantasy from day one, and every day since has been spent bringing that fantasy to life. Every time I think of Star Wars Outlaws, I think of a conversation I had with a friend years ago where he insisted that any Star Wars media couldn't exist or succeed without the Jedi or the Force. In his words, it was the only thing that made Star Wars special, which made no sense to me. This was years ago, but even then, we've seen characters in releases like Lando, Boba Fett, Beckett, Cad Bane, Dash Rendar, Andor, The Mandalorian, and the Book of Boba Fett. Yes, some of these have little hints of the Force or Jedi, but they all excel without them because the world is richer than lightsabers and space magic. The beating heart of the Star Wars galaxy is the dream promised in the stars. Scoundrels are woven into the DNA of Star Wars just as much as any other individual element because at the heart of every scoundrel is the dream of being free, and that richness is what Star Wars Outlaws taps into. Star Wars Outlaws is the first ever open-world Star Wars game set between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Players follow protagonist Kay Vess and her adorable Merkel companion Nix as she seeks to pay off a debt and earn her freedom. She has to assemble a crew, outwit the crime syndicates and ever-present Empire, and pull off a massive heist. In true heist fashion, fans can expect things to go awry and loyalties to be tested, but that's part of that rich DNA too. Even though Star Wars Outlaws is a Scoundrel Fantasy, we had to ask if there would be any inkling of the Force or the Jedi. As Kavari explained, quote, "It was really important to us to tell a story that's really focused on characters who not only aren't part of this epic galactic unrest, but who especially would have no experience with the Force or the Jedi. It's important to remember the time period as well. where the Jedi and Force users are all but eradicated in the galaxy, so it's not really our story to tell. For us, the journey of Kay, Nix, and ND5 navigating the criminal underworld through cities bustling with scoundrels, an open world filled with exotic wildlife, or jumping into dogfights with the Trailblazer brings an immersion into the Star Wars galaxy that we feel players will have never experienced before. While some fans will no doubt be hopeful until, and probably even after, Star Wars Outlaws release, this isn't bad news. Star Wars is not just the Force or the Jedi, and Star Wars Outlaws is tapping into those best bits, found only in wretched hives of scum and villainy. Players will control protagonist Kay Vess and by extension Nix as the main stars of Star Wars Outlaws, but joining their side is also ND5, a BX series droid commando in a trench coat. Vess was raised in the casino city of Canto Bight as seen in The Last Jedi, specifically within its workers' district. The poverty and isolation skills away from the glitz and glam of the casino meant Vess struggled to survive, picking up her skills as a thief in Canto Bight's streets. Envious perhaps of the rich, Vess dreams of leaving Cantonica behind and landing a major score that would set her and Nix up for life, setting the stage for Star Wars Outlaws. She's not alone, of course, as she's joined by Nix, with the developers getting to add this adorable creature to the canon of Star Wars. As Junkers would explain, Merkles originate from a jungle planet. This harsh environment led to the evolution of scales on their back to protect from rain and predators, and they also have dexterous paws, big claws, and sharp teeth. A unique element to Merkles are their feelers, with Junkers explaining that, quote, with those, they can sense the environment for danger. Nix also uses them to communicate with Kay, putting them up when he's excited or has found something, curling them down when he's cautious. Vess and Nix are an iconic duo, not unlike Han and Chewie, C-3PO and R2-D2, Din Djarin and Grogu, or Cal Kestis and BD-1. When asked what Vess and Nix add to that dynamic, Kavari explained their unique role when standing on the shoulders of these giants. Quote, I do think that there's something particularly unique about Kay and Nix, and that they grew up together from when Kay was young. As Kay is someone who really doesn't trust too easily, Nix represents a crack in the armor, her heart, her vulnerability. We infuse so much of our own pets into Nix's character. I know whenever we were writing scripts or talking to Humberly and our fantastic puppeteer Camille, that we really wanted to show Kay seeing Nix not just as a pet, but family, and I think players are really responding to that as it's so relatable. When Garrity described working with the history of Star Wars, he explained the team was able to add in little references to eras such as the Clone Wars through ND5 and other details that players will discover. It's been explained that ND5 fought heavily during the Clone Wars, eventually ending up in deep storage. Come Star Wars Outlaws timeline though, he's been working under an enforcer and becomes entangled with Vess for this heist, but it's unclear how much ND5 can be trusted. There are criminal syndicates, bad guys, evil henchmen, and the Empire lurking around every corner, and it seems that they all want a piece of Vess. Jalen Vrax is a powerful scoundrel in his own right. He suggests Kay Vess rob the Zarek Besh crime syndicate of their fortune, earning a ton of credits and her freedom in the process. However, he can be trusted as far as someone can throw ND5. Slyro is the leader of the Zarek Besh and someone with a deep-rooted dislike for Kay Vess. Why? No one knows yet, but in true Star Wars fashion, some theories suggest Kay Vess stole the Trailblazer from Slyro and the Zarek Besh. The Zarek Besh is a crime syndicate based in Canto Blight. Their activities are largely unknown, but because of their history with Kay Vess, players will not be able to build up any reputation with the Zarek Besh. Vale is a bounty hunter hired by Syro to capture Kay Vess. The Crimson Dawn are led by Solo's Lady Kira, and while they are quite mysterious, they focus on intelligence, manipulation, and using a whole wide network of criminal organizations for their own purposes. They're the ones who sold Han and Carbonite to the Ashiga clan, a brand new crime syndicate for Star Wars Outlaws. They're based on Kijimi. They have a strict hierarchical structure and code of conduct. Players will be able to build a reputation with the Ashiga clan. The Hutt cartel is composed of powerful crime lords and based on Tatooine. They're involved in smuggling and various illegal business practices. Players will be able to hold a reputation with the Hutt cartel. And finally, the Pike Syndicate, a crime syndicate largely focused on spice production and illegal trading. They value credits above all others. Although based on the planet Obadiah, which is not in Star Wars Outlaws, they're involved with a mining operation on Toshara, a Star Wars Outlaws moon. Players will be able to build a reputation with the Pike Syndicate. When it comes to how crime syndicates are represented in Star Wars Outlaws, Junkers explained that, quote, each syndicate is unique, not only in the types of units they deploy, but also the materials and colors they use, the equipment they have, their behavior, and their activities. Some are completely entwined with their base location like the Ashigi or Kijimi, while some are very organized and operating from the shadows like Crimson Dawn. That makes your choices and who to trust very meaningful, and as Kay dives into the underworld, she of course inevitably runs into some familiar faces like Lady Kira or Jabba the Hutt. We had tons of fantastic reference materials provided to us by Lucasfilm to really dive into the details of his design. Whether it was tweaking the slime around his nostrils and mouth to adding the design of his arm tattoo and the wound he has on his tail. The underworld is filled with a rich variety of characters, new and familiar, and I'm looking forward to players meeting them all. Star Wars fans will have to wait and see how these characters and factions come together for Star Wars Outlaws story, but that's still just scratching the surface of what the game offers. Being the first ever open world Star Wars game sets high expectations not just for the story, but also for the planets players will visit, for its on-planet gameplay, and for taking of the stars. Luckily, everything the Star Wars Outlaws devs have told us checks all the right boxes. The planets of Star Wars Outlaws include Tatooine, Tashara, Akiva, Kijimi, or Cantonica. And while there still could be a surprise location or two reserved for the final game, that's already a very solid lineup. Tatooine hardly needs any introduction as the desert planet home of Anakin and Luke Skywalker, having appeared in the franchise many times over. Tashara, on the other hand, is a brand new moon created by Massive Entertainment. It's a moon of the Tashal system, with an environment akin to an African savanna with windswept plains and amber canyons. Its structure allowed pirates and bandits to make the moon their home, with it being known as the Gem of the Underworld. The Pike Syndicate is performing some form of mining operation here, working with the corrupt Imperial governors of Tashara. Akiva is an Outer Rim planet most often mentioned in Star Wars books. Star Wars Outlaws is its first appearance in a major game, but what fans should know is that Akiva is a hotbed for wars across the galaxy. Despite being an Outer Rim planet, it somehow found itself involved in them frequently, and that's likely influenced its design in Star Wars Outlaws in some way. It's a hot jungle planet in contrast with Kijimi, a frigid mountainous planet. Kijimi is seen in The Rise of Skywalker, where Rey and others attempt to modify C-3PO so he can translate the ancient Sith dagger. Of course, things go awry. The First Order arrives, and eventually Kijimi is destroyed. Lastly, Cantonica is known for its role in The Last Jedi and Canto Bight. It's also the home of Kay Vess, which kicks off their entire adventure. What's interesting when looking at these planets as a whole is how different they are in origin. Tatooine is a popular planet seen across the entire franchise, while Toshara is a brand new never-before-seen moon. Akiva is only seen in written works, while both Kamiji and Cantonica appear in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Ubisoft and Massive didn't pull from one inspiration, even with the game's focus on the 70s/80s vibe, and instead pulled from the entire history of Star Wars. Planets are just one part of the formula, as Star Wars is just as much defined by its starships and space battles and exploration as any planet. Every numbered Star Wars mainline film begins in space and transitions down to a planet when necessary, and that moment is reflected in the games. It could not truly be called an open-world game if leaving a planet meant hitting a loading screen, so the transition from planet to orbit to outer space is seamless. It was one of the first goals of Star Wars Outlaws, and that makes it truly remarkable. In fact, stormtroopers on a planet's surface can pursue players into space, which feels mind-blowing and bound to lead to some memorable encounters. As Carlson explained, the design of Star Wars Outlaws exploration and space combat began with the fundamental Scoundrel Fantasy of having a starship to call home. It needed to be something nimble and armed enough for dogfights, but also defensive enough for dangerous trench runs and dealings with various crime syndicates. Enter the Trailblazer. When asked how they designed the Trailblazer, Garrity explained, "Starships in Star Wars are iconic and all immediately recognizable due to their striking silhouettes, and it really was very exciting to create not only a new ship design, but also a backstory for the ship too. It really has had quite a journey of its own before Kay permanently borrows it." The other thing that stood out is the shapes that are used are often based on real-world items, and in our case, we took a lot of inspiration from toys of the 70s and 80s, as well as turtles and armored trucks with their shell plating, which worked well for what we envisioned for the Trailblazer. With the Trailblazer established, then came the realizing part of Star Wars Outlaws' initial pitch: seamless open-world gameplay. As Carlson explained, it was really important to us that space was seamlessly part of the open-world experience. You decide when to go there and what to do. The different space regions are also distinctly different from each other. For example, the dense debris field around Tashara are in stark contrast to the less busy space around Tatooine. Since orbital space around these planets differ, that'll help the identity of each planet players visit. However, that doesn't necessarily mean something like Tatooine is less dangerous than Tashara. Carlson explained that players should be prepared for everything from Imperial patrols to syndicate ships and occasional pirates. When it comes to taking on these orbital encounters and exploring the stars, Carlson says risk and reward is the central theme in space overall. Operating the Trailblazer is more arcade than simulation, and space can consist of one-on-one dogfights, significantly bigger battles, becoming wanted and being chased by the Empire, helping out a syndicate for reputation, getting ambushed by pirates in an asteroid field, and much more. Indeed, it sounds like Star Wars Outlaws truly runs the gamut for bona fide space encounters. Of course, no Star Wars space exploration is incomplete without hyperspace travel, with Podlesnake briefly discussing what it was like recreating it in-game. Quote, "The first time I pushed the 6 forward to enter hyperspace, I had a smile of pure joy on my face. Whenever I play the game, I actively avoid fast travel just to experience this moment. We did look at a lot of footage of hyperspace travel in Star Wars to really nail down the dynamic of every step. The light on the ship, the movement going into it and out of it, there's a lot of nuance to it that's hard to imagine before you have to recreate it for yourself." The work of John Williams in Star Wars overall music orchestration is as iconic as any other element of the franchise. For fans, that's good news because composer Roger II began with the classic John Williams sound as the first point of reference. He believed its focus on melody and nuanced yet direct orchestration works well with Outlaw's focus on a character-driven story. However, he added to that by focusing on the underbelly of Star Wars more so than the original orchestration. Quote, "I also sought to create a new, modern, and unique sound for Outlaws that underscores the grungy and diverse world of Star Wars criminal underbelly. This involved using analog synthesizers, found percussion, instruments played in non-traditional ways, processed sounds, and world instruments to add color and depth to the Scoundrel adventure. Every character, faction, and planet has its own sets of instruments, signature sounds, and musical themes, and every piece in the score has a blend of both traditional Star Wars sound as well as the new Outlaws sound. As we go deeper into the criminal underground, processed and synthesizer-based sounds become more prominent. Just as important is how Star Wars Outlaws feels when boots are on the ground. As an open-world game, there's certainly a freedom to how players approach gameplay. Kay Vess can go in guns blazing, and Kavari insists Vess is the shoot-first type in a situation like Han and Greedo, or she can approach things stealthily. She can rely on her blasters as equally as she can rely on Nyx, who she can give commands to. Nyx can interact with key environment elements, attack enemies, distract them, or fetch supplies, among other possible options. She can also activate various different modes on her blasters, such as stun, focused, or blaster. In a pinch, Vess also has an ability called Adrenaline Rush that's a lot like Red Dead Redemption's Deadeye targeting, as it slows down time and lets Kay make quick shots. It perfectly adds to that Scoundrel Fantasy. Over time, players will be able to invest in Vess and Nyx's abilities, making them even more deadly in combat. Star Wars Outlaws also offers a lot of mechanics for exploring each planet. There's a grappling hook, and grappling hooks always make games better. There's a hacking device for locked doors and the like, which includes terminals and splicing minigames, while there's a speeder bike that Vess can hop on at a moment's notice. Just like it is with the Trailblazer, enemies can pursue Vess when she's on a speeder bike in true Star Wars fashion. Notably, however, some Scoundrel Fantasies aren't about stealth and being quick with a blaster, sometimes it's about having a silver tongue. Star Wars Outlaws features a dialogue tree that will allow Vess to talk her way out of certain scenarios, such as choosing to bribe a corrupted Imperial officer or not. Sometimes these choices will impact Vess's reputation with the criminal syndicate. It's not yet certain how deep this system goes, but having some control over Kay's reputation should go a long way in defining her character. More than anything though, open-world games need something special to them. They're perhaps one of the most popular and busiest genres in gaming, so while hitting all the high points of the genre is important, nailing that special factor is even more so. For Star Wars Outlaws, that special factor is how every mechanic bleeds into one another, with 3 important features feeding further into that: experts, reputation, and wanted. While there will be some core upgrades to Kay Vess, another form of progression in the game is based around her interactions with Star Wars Outlaws expert NPCs. When Kay meets these NPCs, players can accomplish tasks that unlock unique upgrades, improving their overall character. For example, one trailer showed the bartender upgrade and a perk called Fast Talk, which allows players to stall alerted enemies. To unlock it, players need to defeat 5 enemies with melee and take down 3 distracted guards. This gives players plenty of reasons to invest in expert NPCs while engaging in the world around them. When asked how the expert system came to be, Carlson explained that, quote, "We wanted the unlocking of new equipment and abilities in Star Wars Outlaws to be very tangible and closely connected to both the world and interesting characters, for each unlock to be a little adventure in itself and a compelling reason to explore." That's the idea of how experts took shape. Each expert is a gateway to unlock a number of unlocks, but first, you have to reach them. And once you do, you don't know exactly what to expect. What are they like, and what will they want from you? It will, however, always be an adventure, from which you are rewarded with one of their most precious unlocks. Every expert NPC will have a unique set of requirements for each of their unlocks, which give players different goals and ways to engage with the game and the world. Carlson also provided another example of an unlock that asks you to jump your speeder 60 meters without crashing, and suddenly you find yourself looking at the world around you like a motocross park in search of the biggest jumps. These unlocks can drastically change every aspect of VES and allow players to invest in the world around them and their character in unique ways. It's an exciting system, especially knowing that these experts represent several different facets of Star Wars, like the Gunslinger. Both Star Wars Outlaws' reputation and wanted systems were essential pieces to realize that Scoundrel Fantasy. This reputation system represents the transactional nature of the underworld, specifically with the 4 core criminal syndicates. Throughout the game, players will make key decisions or tackle certain missions that impact these criminal syndicates. Attacking the Hutts, for example, will reduce VES's reputation with them, while completing missions for them will increase it. Not only does the system impact how missions are completed, a poor reputation with the Pikes will see increased defenses against VES, while a good reputation could let you walk around their bases without a sweat, but it also has its own rewards such as armor sets when maxed out. This system works well with the Scoundrel Fantasy of Star Wars Outlaws, but also it's enough to imagine how Han Solo's reputation with the Hutt Cartel or the Guavian Death Gang went. There's also an A and B dynamic when it comes to these criminal syndicates. They don't like each other, and doing something to gain reputation with one will possibly result in losing reputation with another. As Carlson explained, a very important aspect of its design is that you're never stuck, and you don't have to stick with one specific syndicate. You'll definitely be able to gain an excellent reputation with each syndicate at some point in your journey through the game, just not with all of them at the same time. They don't like each other, so what's appreciated by one is often frowned upon by another, presenting you as a player with lots of fun A or B choice moments. A scoundrel is an outlaw, and an outlaw is always anti-authority. VES deals with Imperials and Stormtroopers throughout the game, and she can get their unwanted attention. Whether by directly attacking them, doing something obviously illegal, or so on, VES can trigger Wanted status. The highest level is Wanted 6, where players will be swamped with more and more Stormtroopers as that Wanted level increases. At level 6, Death Troopers are deployed. These incredibly tough enemies set up camp, and players can infiltrate these camps to erase their Wanted status. Of course, Death Troopers are not taken down as easily as Stormtroopers. This Wanted status can still follow players into space where, at level 6, massive enemy ships can attack the Trailblazer. There is a way to end the Wanted status while in space too, and other options in general, but the way all of this weaves in and out of each other is remarkable. While discussing Star Wars Outlaws' Wanted system, Carlson explained how the sheer premise of the game begs for a Wanted system. Quote, an open-world Star Wars game about an outlaw, a scoundrel set between Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars Return of the Jedi when the Empire is at the peak of its power and reach, it begs for a Wanted system. It adds not just immersion and fantasy fulfillment, but also a dynamic to the entire game world, from city streets to space. A world that reacts to your actions in an intuitive way and lets you try to fight as many Stormtroopers as you can. There's no Jedi to save the day, no presence of the Force guiding Kay, Vess, and Nix, and no Skywalker to unceremoniously lose a hand. There's just Vess, her companion Nix, her trusty Trailblazer, and the blaster at her side. It's a different type of Star Wars story, one just as important as the Jedi, and that's the kid forced to grow up on the streets of an unforgiving galaxy. Despite her hardships, Vess has a dream, just as Star Wars Outlaws is a dream game for its developers. When talking about Star Wars Outlaws Scoundrel Fantasy and how the developers worked to realize it, Garrity explained, "We looked at a lot of Star Wars media and of course iconic scoundrels of the series such as Han Solo and Lando Calrissian, but for Kay Vess, we wanted to create a modern new scoundrel. She's someone we wanted to be really grounded and relatable. She grew up in the workers' district of Canto Bight with no one but Nix at her side, seeing the rich get richer and having nothing. That's really her drive, to create a life where her and Nix can travel the galaxy without answering to anyone. Her dream of freedom and a good life is relatable and speaks to the heart of Star Wars. Every Star Wars story is a tale of oppression and freedom in some form, and Star Wars Outlaws focuses on that escape every child from the streets dreams of. More than its Jedi versus Sith conflict, more than its Chosen One prophecy, more than the Force, the heart of Star Wars is a dream. And as a part of their dream to make Star Wars Outlaws, the developers at Massive Entertainment have woven the dream to be free into every element of this scoundrel fantasy." Thank you for watching Game Rant. I'm Cameron. We'll see you next time.